Hi, and welcome to SubHub Podcast. You may be wondering why I'm talking in English. That's because that's our first English-speaking episode. And I'm here, Nikita, also with Vitaly, and our new co-host, Dmitry.
Hi, everybody. Today we have our 8th episode of our podcast. Today in SubHub, we have our first English-speaking guest, which is very good. It's Thomas Petit, very famous because of his Twitter. Probably you heard of Thomas BCN handle. And if you do not follow him, you should do it right now. Today we have Nikita, Vitaly as always, and me, Dmitry. Hi, Thomas. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. But now I feel a lot of FOMO for having missed the non-English speaking podcast. So I'm going to look for some sound translation software to catch up.
Yeah, we do have a translation for each podcast, by the way.
Oh,
like yeah.
A written one?
Yeah, or like a written one. And,
I totally need to check that then.
We invite awesome guests, just like you, from different subscription apps. So yeah.
Awesome. Already one item on my to-do list then.
Great to hear it.
All right. So, Thomas, I think like most of our audience know you because of Twitter. But could you please like briefly describe what you're doing and what was your background? So you're a consultant right now. How did you come to this? What did you do before? And yeah, so a little bit of your background.
So currently what I'm trying to do is to help subscription apps grow. Like I really mostly specialize on mobile apps. I don't do so much web anymore. And that includes a lot of the acquisition part, but also like onboarding and monetization and data topic. So kind of a bit of a broad area. The way I got there, initially, I started over 10 years ago. I built a SaaS, like a web SaaS back then. There was no app store for doctors, like a B2B SaaS, which failed miserably, but it was extremely enlightening and lots of learnings. And then I started working at other people's startups, mostly in the e-commerce space, because like late 2000, it's what there was hot back then at the time. And I kind of witnessed the app store starting to grow in the early 2010. I was very excited by that. I sent my CV all around, and that was mostly games at the time. And they all told me, no. And they all rejected me. And they told me, no, you're lacking 3-4 years of mobile marketing experience, which nobody had because the App Store was like 1 or 2 years old. So that was a bit ridiculous. And I felt a bit frustrated. I missed the wave. So I kept working on e-commerce and SaaS startups, mostly web stuff, mostly acquisition and analytics, until 2014 or 15. A founder in the app space trusted that I could do that. And I joined a fitness app called 8Fit in its very early days. I kind of was lucky to be in the right place at the right time, not only because the company was like great culture and growing fast and all, but it was the very early days of subscription back then. And I could follow a little bit like the huge development it had over the last, I'd say mostly 3-4 years, because in the early days it was not as significant as now. So mostly lucky to be in the subscription space, and it somehow stick to me after that. Like I kind of liked it, and it seemed the space liked me, so I stick to that. And I do mostly subscription apps these days. I don't do a lot of other monetization methods, trade cards, ads, others. And yeah, so I stayed there like for a few years, maybe 3-4 years. The app grew nicely. And at some point I felt the need to go by my own wings and not be an employee anymore. My main goal was actually to learn from a lot of different verticals. And the fitness space was kind of an interesting, fitness and nutrition space was an interesting one and growing, but I wanted to see many other things. And that's how I moved to being independent about 4 years ago or so. Yeah, I guess 4 years ago. And since then I work with a variety of apps. So I guess that goal is kind of fulfilled in a way that I see education apps and productivity apps and health and fitness, lots of mental health these days, but it comes and goes with the trends. And yeah, so that's kind of where I am right now.
You mentioned you joined the company in 2014 or 15. If I recall it correctly, 2015 was actually the year when Apple introduced in-app subscriptions, right? So you started it right after it introduced that, right?
Correct. So the company started in 2014, but at the beginning we only had like a crappy MVP, and I think we started selling on Stripe, but it was the app wasn't even there. It's like kind of a newsletter with some content, and some people would pay on Stripe. But I guess as soon as Apple introduced subscriptions, that's more or less when our app started getting ready, or at least we could show it to some people. And so pretty much that's where I got lucky, because this was the coincidence that I was there when kind of this kind of started, and we were jumping on it straight away, and that has been 90% of the company's revenue for the following years. So yeah, pretty much of a coincidence, but the timing fit pretty good back then.
Yeah, you have to know where to be in the right place. To be lucky. Okay, but with what type of apps do you work now? So do you have any preferences about the verticals or type of companies for current gigs?
So I have a preference for variety, because I think that's the way I learn most. So I try to keep different verticals, not too much because I don't like to work for competing apps. Like I could have 2 meditation apps or 2 photo editors, but it's mostly I like to keep it broad so that I learn from various spaces. So when I'm missing out on something, I'm trying to get some attention there because I'm seeing some verticals growing. So among my long-term client, there's one in the education space, a kids app. Kids app are a bit particular, but it's very interesting because of the differences. I've got a productivity app in the photo and video editing space. I've got a music app. So in the subscriptions, what I call content subscription, so music, videos, streaming, and news, I think have a bit of different mechanics. So it's also very interesting to have one in that space. And then a few others, but mostly to keep it diversified. The other thing I try to keep a bit of a variety on is the stage those companies are. I personally particularly like the early stages when there's everything to do and teams are small. Maybe it's just a founder, maybe usually a teams of less than 10, 1 marketing person, 2 technical people, very small teams. I really like this stage, but I can't do only that, mostly because then you're missing out on trends from some bigger apps. And so if I look at my portfolio right now, I've got one that's a unicorn, one that is in what I call the middle class of apps, somewhere between 6 and 7 digits monthly, which is most of my focus. And then I try to dedicate a lot of time with companies that are very early stage, either pre-revenue or they're just launching, just out of personal interest. It excites me. Sometimes, I shouldn't say that publicly. Sometimes I don't even charge for those because I think it's exciting and it's cool to help founder. And the way I see it, it's seeds that are going to repay later because some of these companies are going to grow and need me later down the road. So I try to keep it a bit of a mix, not only in vertical, but also, let's call it horizontal, as the stage grow. And I think that mix is what makes things interesting for me.
I think that unites all these apps is subscription-based monetization, right?
Yeah, correct. I have 1 or 2 exceptions just because I like the founder, so I take it. But 95% of apps I work with, they primarily monetize through subscription. It doesn't mean only through subscription, but primarily.
Is there a difference in these verticals? I mean, in terms of user acquisition, how you acquire subscribers in mobile apps? For example, if I have a photo app and, my friend has a fitness app, is there a different on strategies on how do I need to get new subscribers?
I guess sometimes some channels can work better than others because of the audience fit or particular way people on board and so on. But I think those differences, they're actually relatively minimal. Where the difference is really big is on crafting the messaging part. How do you think about your positioning in the App Store? How do you produce creative? So there is obviously a very, very different aspect depending on these verticals. But in technically on UA, how you measure it, which big channels, metrics, it's actually very similar, which for me makes it very interesting because then I can also port learnings from a vertical to another. Like within companies, people tend to look mostly at the direct competition. And I think there's a massive learnings to be done from looking at other verticals. And fitness app could pretty much learn from the leading education app or productivity app or like weather apps in terms of acquisition, I believe in a very close way. And it helps you also not doing exactly what the competition is doing. So I think here the mechanics are pretty similar. It's just like messaging and creative wise, it's very different, but not on channels, metrics, optimization, and so on.
Right. Any particular vertical that you are interested in right now? I know that this question may be tough, but you mentioned that you just try to keep the variety and maybe something that interests you. So what's you're interested in now?
Well, there's a huge trend in new and early stage mental health apps right now. And I guess maybe the way I see it is first there was this wave of meditation coming from nowhere and just booming massively, with Calm and Headspace now being massive, and a long tail of apps after that that are following or they're doing the business independently of the two leaders. But this really opened up the space for other kind of solutions for similar problems of stress, anxiety, and this can be answered in so many ways. Like meditation is a good solution. There are so many others, and I'm seeing a lot of like innovative answers to that big problem. So I think the mental health space is really a very interesting one. Personal development is also like maybe a slightly older one, but also very big with lots of different solutions. Like what Blinkist is doing is very different from what I don't know what example I can give you, but like there's a lot of things happening in this particular space as well. So pretty much booming space where I'm seeing new solution to old problems. This is something that's very exciting for me. And then there's one I kind of really like working with original and different kind of use case. People who try to digitalize something that has been pretty much physical until recently, like, I don't know, comics app, or I heard a very, very strange case recently, but what other I can think of? Toothbrush, digital toothbrush analysis app. Like, there's a lot of small. It's David Barnard who mentioned to me like this app that is for knitters, like for people who do knitting. Like, there's kind of lots of niches that are super interesting. I think it's kind of innovative. I had a client that was in the sexual education space. Also kind of an interesting one, which now has grown in competition. So I like those who are either booming, like mental health, or those who are very different and kind of something new, something innovative that excites me because it's not another meditation app. It's something I haven't seen before, and that tends to excite me quite a bit.
How long do you think this trend will work? About mental health, because probably in a couple of years we will restore from these COVID things.
Yep.
And maybe back to normal fitness stuff. In the long term, how do you think it will work?
Here I'd say like there are a bit two trends that I'm seeing. One is that there's the App Store is very cyclical. Like, 1 year, what is trendy is meditation, and the following year it's journaling, and the year before that it was fitness, and the year after that it's nutrition and fasting. For example, fasting app, they're very trendy. Like, they've grown a lot over the last year or so, and I think there's lots of cycles here that come and goes. It doesn't mean that fasting or meditation are going down, but they have the momentum that for 1 or 2 years they really grow insanely, and then the attention is on a new space, and kind of the App Store tend to have this mechanics of there's always this new thing that is exciting and growing very fast, and then maybe reach a plateau or just matures and become different kind of companies. So it's possible that we are in kind of such a cycle for mental health. But at the same time, I think the problem these apps are trying to tackle, it's very long-term problems that with COVID obviously was exacerbated and everybody had to focus on it. But I don't think they're answering like something that is COVID related. I mean, stress and anxiety were there before, it's accelerating. And even though many of the startups answer some of these needs, I'm not seeing this problem going down anytime soon. So I think mental health is actually not only here to stay, but there's a huge room for growing in various subspace within that. So I think this is a long-term thing that's going to stay.
Mm-hmm. And how to notice these trends? Do you need to be a consultant in many apps to see these changes, or maybe observe some, trends on App Store search or anything?
I mean, there's a lot of people working on that, especially on the investing side, like people trying to spot these trends, and looking at how App Store rankings are changing, looking at how search volumes are moving around, looking at even on social, what's trendy on Instagram, looking at what other investment are making in the space. There are lots of signals that you can see. For me, personally, it's mostly out of luck, and I don't know. I collaborate with quite a few founders who tend to be serial founders. So every 2-5 years they would start something new and they mention it to me, and that's it's kind of, I don't actively look for what's the new trendy space. It kind of strikes me like, oh, I've got 2-3 people who are trying to build something in that space that I don't know anything of, and then I get curious about it. So for me, it's not actively looking. I'm not trying to be like spotting what is going to be the trend of next year. I just wait for it to start and somehow get the signal that there's something exciting going on there. And I don't know, through contacts of founders, but eventually, if you look a little bit at App Store rankings, or just following fundraising in the very early stage VC part, not in the growing stage. I mean, you start detecting these trends kind of naturally just by following news, and you see what's new and exciting. But then it also come and goes, so you have to it's interesting, but something that just fads. You never know until they go down.
Probably another good idea is to track Crunchbase in some kind of these investment platforms, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like, as I said, I'm not actively doing that, but that's definitely a good way to see which small space are popping up. And then sometimes you just see it. Like, I don't know, if I look at my Twitter feed, like the word NFT would probably have mentioned 1 time in a million last year, and then suddenly it's half of my feed, and I need to mute the word because I can't get any more of it or something. Like, sometimes you just see it. Like, it's just, I don't know, the audio space, for example. I mean, there was this huge spike of interest when Clubhouse was everywhere, not only on Twitter, but like here and there, like everybody would talk about that. And then right now we don't hear about it, but I still think the audio space is a very big one. Like, you see, podcast is a signal, Clubhouse is a signal. There are many other signals, like audio fitness app, audio, like lots of audio solution for a lot of things. Speechify, Blinkist. So I think the whole overall audio space is also like a long-term one that's super interesting, but then you don't have to be blinded by one spike. It's not about Clubhouse. It's about people are looking into consuming more audio content in general. And maybe Clubhouse is going to eventually succeed. I have no idea. What I'm seeing behind is, the attention to audio only products is much, much bigger than it used to be 2-3 years ago. And I don't think that one is going out anytime soon either.
You just mentioned NFT. So what's your general take on crypto? Because what we feel is like there are 2 huge bubbles that do not really overlap, like mobile and crypto, like both worth like billions of dollars, and just like all the crypto projects for some reason they just live on the web. They do not really go mobile, maybe besides just like some like few number of popular wallets, but like overall. So what do you think about crypto? So do you look at this stuff, or you just like distance yourself and mute NFT?
And do you buy crypto stones?
So first, not a lot of overlap with mobile and with my current like professional activity at the moment. I guess it will come in forms of in many forms, not only in the form of monetization, but also communities and so on. I guess it will come, but there's very little overlap. On a personal level, I still keep an eye on it. I think like it's interesting because it's new and exciting and growing fast, like I said before, but also because it's very disrupting potentially a lot of industries, just like digital in general, and then mobile have disrupted a lot of businesses that were going for decades, and I strongly believe crypto is going to do the same in many, many, many different spaces. So it's definitely interesting to follow. There's also a lot of noise, so I tend to listen more than I talk on that. And I have a big mouth, so I tend to give my opinion on everything. But on crypto, I'm actually quite conservative and careful about not jumping in. So I'm more of a consumer in the space than I am of a not evangelist, but like ambassador or something. So I tend to stay quiet. I don't want to take too many big takes and then people lose money and they think it's because of me. So I tell them like, no, go ask elsewhere. But I've been following the space for a while and it's definitely a space of interest. I actually, as a coincidence, I worked at a Bitcoin startup in 2014. So relatively in the early days of crypto. I think Ethereum didn't even exist back then, if I'm not wrong. Maybe just starting, I don't know. I can't remember exactly the dates, and just because, I don't know, a founder came to me and he had this Bitcoin startup and I didn't even know what that was. And I thought, oh, let's check it out. And it was interesting. The sad part here is back then my bank account was in the negative. So I didn't want to take debt to actually buy these risky coins that nobody knew back then where they were going. So I don't have any of these Bitcoins that were worth maybe $400 or something back then. So I guess we're around 100x now. So terribly non-investment decision for me. That will be in my anti-portfolio for a long time. I do hold some coins, I think, now. Like my bank account is not in the red anymore. And whether you're a strong believer or not in the crypto space, I think anyone that has some money on the side, it would be stupid not to have 5 or 10% there as a diversifying thing. Maybe you've got a flat, maybe you've got stocks, maybe you've got gold, whatever is your thing. I think not having 5 or 10% is kind of a bit bizarre. Some people are more bullish and probably put a lot more than that in percentage, and that's fine. Might be a bit risky. They might win, they might lose, I don't know. But I think today it's big enough and mature enough that it should be part of portfolio. And personally, I would find it a bit bizarre not to have any if you've got money on the side. If you don't have money to invest, don't invest money you can't lose. That would be even more stupid. But if you do have money to invest, I think having a small share there is just completely natural. And then you weight your risk profile. So maybe you're going to go for the big ones, or maybe a bit more bullish. So I think now the space is very exciting in some altcoins that used to be pretty much shit coins, but now have very strong project behind and that have huge potential for actual use case, like real life use case. And that's very exciting. I'm particularly interested in parachains and smart contracts coins at the moment. So for people who are not too much in the space, Ethereum over Bitcoin, like 10x, but even smaller coins that have real use case, I think is a very interesting trend to follow right now.
There is a popular opinion, I think Ryan Hoover formulated it, is like joining Discord right now is like installing the social apps in early 2010s.
Yeah.
It's like you just join it there, just like very interesting, very bright. Nobody knows whether they're going to live or die. And it's just like something you go and explore.
You never know what is going to impose itself as the app that everybody has. And you look like today, grandmas on Facebook, but you don't know if the grandmas of 5 years ahead, they're going to be on Discord, they're going to be on Telegram, or they're going to be on another one that we don't even have right now. So I don't know. It's interesting to follow a few. You can't be everywhere either. So I kind of stayed pretty far from Clubhouse myself. But yeah, you have to make your bets. So I already have a big bet on Twitter, so I have to be careful about my other bets there. But I do follow a couple of Slacks, Discord, Telegram, even web forums, you name it, Reddits. Yeah. Information is everywhere.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. So
Sure.
We are recording this in the second week of September, and last 2 weeks were tremendous in terms of changes of App Store policies, South Korea, Japan, and first time we heard about some legislation from South Korea, I think, for a while. So I think everybody knows what's happening. So Apple is being, under pressure for some time now. So what's your take on that? So in general, so do you think how important those changes are? what do you think the long-term development of that would be? Would developer ecosystem actually, grow faster or better, or actually it doesn't really matter what's going on with this like 30% cut, side loading and all this stuff? So what's your take on that?
I think in a way, if you look at it from a long-term perspective and not the news that is happening right now, like it was kind of inevitable that there would be some change in the lock we have on payment system, and that in-app purchases would not be the only way to charge user forever. And I think this was coming sooner or later. Could have come sooner, could have never happened, could have happened later, but it was going to come at some point because this industry is very big now, so it's attracting a lot of attention. And then big tech is also at a point where it's getting a bit more scrutiny. So I think it kind of logical that this is all aligning to make a lot of headlines. But then there are a few things here that I think regulators needs to be careful, but also developers needs to be a bit aware, and also users, is that opening up either the store to sideloading or the payment system is not this magical land of I'm going to pay 3% instead of 30%. It comes with everything, with pro and cons. And I say one of the cons is complexity. You're going to have to manage several payment systems in parallel, I believe. Even though, let's say we're fast forward a few months ahead and both Apple and Google have to open their store to other payments, I bet a lot of developers, subscription developers in particular, they're still going to charge through store payment. At least store payment and something else, possibly combine them. Store payment have a lot of benefits that people don't realize. They're always the 30% Apple tax, blah, blah, blah. But there's also a huge benefit in trust, because people convert much higher when they pay to Apple than they pay to a developer they don't know. There's a lot of small bits that they're doing for you, like tax and refunds and stuff. There's a lot of benefits of having the store payment, even if the commission is big. And I think it will stay, because the convenience of just paying through a Face ID or a Touch ID is just so massive, comparing to I have to add my credit card, what's that? Where we might see anyway some innovation, like something more similar to Apple Pay and Google Pay, so that I don't have to enter my credit card everywhere. For user, it also generates actually my payment is going to this bunch of companies I have no clue about, and where before it was centralized. So I think, developers shouldn't see it as a magical land, but it's definitely exciting because it brings new possibility. What our conversion rate are going to look like, maybe a bit more profitability, which will unlock more growth, ability to acquire faster. There's definitely an interesting one. I would be careful on the last thing is that headlines and reality are often not aligned exactly, and especially over time. So we're not seeing for example, Korea that has moved this law, which by the way is mainly targeting at Google. It's called the Google Anti-Abuse Act. So Apple is just a casualty in this act in a way, which is quite ironical when you look at it. But and for now, it's not like any developer in Korea can already open up to Stripe in their app. The bill is not even voted. We don't know exactly how it's going to be enforced. Sooner or later it will, but I guess we're still a month ahead of complete radical change. They're not there yet. For now, it's in the headlines. Let's see how it pans out. I don't think everything is going to happen from a day to another. It's good to get prepared anyway. And there's a lot of developers that already open up to other payments by charging on the web and deriving traffic there. What I'm seeing is potential, but also bigger complexity. If you're a very small indie developer and you just have to integrate with IAP, was kind of not a walk in the park. It's tricky, and you need solid providers to help. But it was simple in a way that it's just that, and then suddenly, but actually Stripe doesn't work well in that country, and I need Alipay, and I need to integrate Apple Pay, and I need to integrate and Stripe, and I need for Latin America to integrate those other payment providers, and it's a world of bigger complexity as well, which for indies is tricky, and for UX, and you got a lot of legacy around that. I believe lots of provider in the subscription payment space, starting with you guys, have actually a big role to help developer there. And it's oh, before we were managing your subscription data, but actually today we can connect all of this for you and make super clear report about refunds and tax and commissions and help developers manage this turn. That is going to be, it's exciting, but it won't be a walk in the park, I believe.
I think we have a pretty big player in this area right now. It's called Xsolla. Do you know these guys?
No, I don't know these guys.
So it's a pretty huge company with 3 billion valuation.
Oh, wow.
Bootstrapped company with only one founder.
Wow.
And they provide all these features, but for desktop games. So, for example, they work with Steam, with Epic Store, and they manage everything. So if you sign up, for example, from Europe, you see one or multiple payment options. If you sign up from the US, you see PayPal and some local payment options, and etc. They manage all accounting, all taxation for you. And I really believe if this will happen, Xsolla will cost like 10 billion in a way of 6 months.
Yeah, could be. I would think the other way around, which is they could kind of start interesting developers, but maybe they don't have the in-app payment part yet. And mobile provider can actually add some of this functionality while keeping what they have on the IAP and actually eat some of their cake. I mean, it's a growing cake, so probably both things are going to happen. That company is going to grow massively, but there's also space for other to jump in the space and be agile and having the specifics of mobile already plugged in, because it's easier to add Stripe on top of IAP than it is to add IAP on top of Stripe. But yeah, I can see how this is going to be a very interesting space, and not all developers are going to want to do all of that on their own. Doesn't make sense, not their core. So I expect providers there to have a good year, I guess, in 2022.
Do you think maybe Apple will catch up with features about subscriptions, maybe even lower even more commission, or let us handle refunds, for example?
I guess they'll have to bring some change, either lowering the commission in some cases. I don't think they're going to change it radically, but they will lower it for some cases. Like, I don't know which cases. Like, for example, in Japan, for now, I think it's only the Readers app. Like, they're kind of going to be selective. It's going to be progressive. So maybe the commission is going to go a little bit down, but mostly on what they provide, they're going to see that they need to provide a big value for people to be interested in keeping that payment system as it opens up. And I think it's exciting because it pushes them to offer us better value for what they're charging from. So opening the refunds to us, honestly, I wish, but I don't think so. But I think there's a lot of other things that they could do to make developers' life easier around their subscription. And also for users as well, like pushing away. They already have made change recently in the last years that make subscriptions a little bit clearer for user. I still think it's not very natural for everybody, but in a way, if they provide value to user that makes that having the subscription through all in the same place through Apple as a huge benefit and is easy to manage, maybe user will prefer that payment system even though it's slightly more expensive. And then it pushes developer to keep providing it just because user favor it. So I'm not sure if they're going to work towards developer, towards user, or both, but I think there's a lot of work on their plate to keep competitive and keep us interesting in their payment method, which whatever they're going to do is not going away anytime soon. Like, it will be one of several. It's not going to vanish altogether. I'm pretty sure of that.
And you mentioned that subscriptions are still not really clear to people in terms of pricing and conversions from trial and so on. Do you notice any difference in people's, do they learn how to work subscriptions? Maybe they cancel trials faster or so on. Did you notice any trends about that?
I started noticing that some people are talking for the first time about subscription fatigue. I think we're far from it yet. It might happen in some cases, but we're far from it. We're just, for me, we're just at the beginning. But there are small strands here and there that are signals that I think should be taken into account. Like typically on the trials, you would notice younger audience are much more aware of how trials in the store work, and maybe they've been tricked before, maybe they learn faster, I don't know, but you would not, if you're able to isolate cohort of people under maybe 25, you'll see a huge percentage of user who the next thing they do after starting the free trial is pushing the auto renewal off, which is a behavior that you wouldn't see on audience over 40 years old, or very little. I mean, maybe 1 or 2% of older people are doing it, and you're seeing massive amount of younger people doing it, 30%, 40%, depends the app. Like the numbers vary widely, it doesn't matter if it's 20 or 40. What I'm saying is you can see that younger users are reacting very different to this. Here, the issue is that as a developers, there's not that much you can do besides being transparent on your paywall and helping them in your customer support and having clear terms and so on. There are small things you can do, but a lot of the work depends on the store themselves. And I think here there's a huge opportunity with this payment opening to actually, if you're integrated with whatever it is, like Stripe, or Adyen, or PayPal, or whatever it is, to actually provide a way to manage free trials and refunds in a better way than the store is doing. And that's why I hope that Apple is going to be pushed to improve their own system. Because today developers have basically zero leverage to play on that. It's a bit of a shame, like, because not only because it's twisting metrics, but there's a lot of like, it's not the way it should be. Like a user shouldn't have to go through, oh yeah, start the free trial and I cancel immediately because I want this, and like this is not the way it should be designed. So I kind of user hacked Apple system. Apple will have to answer back, I guess. So there are small signals that behavior are changing. What I don't believe in is that fatigue is already happening. Like at the contrary, people are going to becoming like more adult. I'm even seeing like services to manage all your subscription that you input, like, oh yeah, I'm paying Netflix here and Headspace there and this there and this fitness and this maybe iCloud, and I think just people are going to get more mature, adult, and aware of that. It opens up even more possibility for subscription, I believe.
How many active subscriptions do you have?
Actually, not that many, because I try a lot and then I cancel them. I can't stick to all of them. But I'm not sure the exact number, but definitely more than 10 and less than 100. So somewhere around that.
Well, all right. Let's say 15.
Yeah, maybe 20-ish. Yeah.
Don't you think it's too much? I mean, I also have maybe 10 subscriptions, and I really think it's pretty a lot.
I mean, the ones I'm keeping is I really see value in them, and I think here is where there are several beauty in the subscription model, but one of them is that it aligns a little bit more user interest with the developers. I'm gonna keep paying this developer because I'm extracting value out of this, and the developer is pushed to keep providing me value. Otherwise, I'm gonna go. I'm not really counting subscriptions as alive when I don't know. I'm paying a yearly. I have a sleep app, like sleeping app. I don't have any problems to sleep. I just wanted to test it and I paid for it, and I'm not using it. I know I'm not paying it next year. For me, I don't count it in my active subscription, even though I've paid it this year. It's kind of, I only count the one that I intend to keep paying. And I don't think it's too much, because if I wasn't interesting, I'd just cancel them and move on to another one, and that's fine. I mean, it depends on your income as well, and that's kind of obvious. And you have, if your margin, financial margin is limited, that's definitely something you want to keep a close eye on, like how much I'm actually spending there, what is alive, what I need to cancel. That's where services start to pop up in there. But in my case, no, I don't think it's too much. I think I'm getting value out of it, and when I don't, I just kick them out.
I have a pretty interesting story explaining why, for example, in Eastern Europe, people cancel subscriptions a lot more than, for example, in US.
Yeah.
And the
Tell
main
me
reason
about it. I'm curious. I always notice this trend, and I don't know why, so I want to know.
And I think the main reason is, in US, people don't receive messages on each charge.
Uh-huh.
It's crucially important. So here, when I'm charged even $1,
yeah,
I receive a bank message. And I say, hey, what is it? I mean, I didn't subscribe, and I just cancel it.
Yeah, I see.
Easier
And that's a
to
point.
notice.
Yes,
and also in the US, it usually with credit cards, and in Europe, and especially in Eastern Europe, usually debit cards. This is your money. This is not bank's money, so you feel it more personal.
I actually received this very morning a notification from my bank that Netflix just took me €13. So I guess it depends bank to bank, and it might be more common in Eastern Europe, maybe Russia. I'm not too sure. But I think it doesn't explain all of it in a way that locally sometimes culture is a bit different. For example, the fact that trial rates are much lower in Russia, that's before the billing. You don't even get the billing notification. Like people cancel before the first billing notification. So I guess this might be a good hypothesis, but there are others around it. I don't know. Like, yeah, some countries are very different. I'd say Russia is a big one. China, Germany tends to be slightly different as well, at least in my case.
I think it's also a reason why we have a lot of developers who are pretty rich, but they don't use local market at all for selling their subscriptions.
Mm-hmm.
So they started, promoting their subscriptions abroad from day zero, buying traffic all the way in US, in these countries.
Well, personally, I think if you're early stage, unless your service has a strong local component, like you're delivering something or you have scooters or whatever, but in most cases, in my opinion, it makes sense to start this way. Like, first, because the US is if I exclude China, which is a very particular market, the US store is probably 50% of the App Store or 40, or like it's so massive. It's just one language. It's easy, like it's kind of easier, in my opinion, to develop for the English market, but also mostly because I have a bunch of clients that are European specifics that started in Germany or Spain or others. And the way I see it, it's easier to start with the US market and expand if you're successful than actually being super successful in Italy or France and then think, oh no, I'm going to go to the US. Like this move is kind of harder in a way, or at least that's what I've witnessed for the apps I work with. And there are always exceptions. Some people manage to do this move, but in terms of expansion, of acquisition, of potential, of simplification, also of, legals and language and habits, just makes it easier to go to the US alone, I believe, at first. For most cases, not all cases. Also from an investment point of view, like if you're not bootstrapped, it's just like you're going to convince bigger fish if your app is getting traction in the US than if it's getting traction in the Netherlands or Greece or whatever country for that matter. I don't have anything against Greeks or Dutch or Spanish or French. No harm intended here. It's just from an investment perspective, it's just more exciting for people if your traction is in North America.
Yeah. What do you feel about the general European ecosystem? Because I think for many years it was like the common feeling that Europe a little bit is falling behind the US, and now it's falling behind China and the US as well. But from our perspective, it seems like in mobile ecosystem, it's not like truly the case. Like there are many companies and many mobile apps that are successful in Europe and also in the US that's working from the Europe. So you work with many companies. So what's your ratio between American and European companies? And do you feel this like struggle to keep up with US companies?
I have a very high percentage of the companies I work with that are in Europe, but I guess that's mostly based because of my network and people I know and things I'm closer to, also easier from a time zone perspective. So my personal case is a bit irrelevant here. If I look generally, I guess there are two bits here. One is some spaces Europe I don't think will ever catch up. So if you take like the big giants like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, we're not going to do anything with those. Like, okay, we've got Spotify, one exception, but the rule is this space is taken. Nobody's going to compete with Google starting anywhere in Europe. It's just not going to happen. But then you've got other spaces. I don't know. China is really big on a lot of things, and on machine learning, patents, and research and development, they're already ahead of the States. And I think here in Europe, it's going to be really hard to catch up, and we may never catch up. But then you've got subspace where this is not true, and there's lots of room to grow. And I think specifically for the mobile ecosystem in general, for subscription apps in particular, there's a lot of cool projects that have big potential. There's a lot of talent, and there's already a bunch of use cases that start to be more successful. And it's kind of a flywheel here, is that you've got a few winners which attract talent, which get better, and then it forms like a mafia of people who start new companies. So we've seen that with Skype and with Skype. We've seen that with now other companies. Like, I don't know, I was reading something about the French unicorn market, and if you take it 5 years ago, it's like France was in the Middle Age, and suddenly French is trendy, and they've got like a bunch of startups in the medical space, in the mobility space, like really big startups, like not growing phase, like startups like Doctolib and BlaBlaCar and Deezer and Algolia, and I guess there is really a flywheel there where everybody gets smarter and better, from founders to employees to investors, like at every level. And I'm seeing very exciting trends in Europe for this. One country that is very representative of this, that you don't need to be huge to actually be at the forefront, I think is Israel, in mobile in particular. Like, it's crazy the amount of companies that originated in Israel that are leaders on different mobile subsets, especially in ad tech, obviously, but in many spaces. And they managed to grow like a huge ecosystem of talent, of investors that is really high level, and that is competing with US developer or beating them many times. And so the more we see some winner emerge, I read Babbel was going public yesterday. The more we see that, the more I believe it would create a longer tail of other people following this, and actually Europe not being that much of a laggard like they are for social network or machine learning.
I think Israel just really crazy. I mean, they have the largest B2B development in the world. I just think.
Yeah, I know. In SaaS and ad tech, this is the Tel Aviv scene is super impressive. Like
Mecca.
And the level of talent and like the maturity, the new ideas that pop there, you look at them and say, I don't know, they're 5 years ahead of where I am, and that makes it super interesting.
I think both of Iron Source and how their competitor called it, I forgot. AppSflyer, right? I think they're both from Israel.
So Iron Source, I'm sure. AppSflyer, I can't remember where it did originate, but could be. Yeah, it's very possible.
Could be.
And many others. That's crazy. Is also the amount of it. It's not like 2-3 examples that now are really big, but like there's really like a huge ecosystem. And then the frontiers blur a little bit because company grow, and then they start having several headquarters, people around the world. I mean, AppsFlyer is also headquartered next to Tel Aviv. Like, there's so many of them. But yeah, AppsFlyer is also in the States and in China and in Latin America. But there are many examples like those two, like Ironsys and AppsFlyer. Yeah, makes it super interesting. So anybody can compete kind of on the long term. You don't have to be a huge country or anything. Even Scandinavia is a good example for that in mobile gaming. Like, I mean, markets with less than 10 million people, and eventually they bring us the Rovio and the Supercell and countless of others. Like, not only Rovio and Supercell, like there's lots of others. And I think that's a great example to follow for other sub-vertical. Eastern Europe and Russia is actually really big. It's surprisingly big for subscription apps. It's also really big in the ASO space. Like, the level of talent I'm seeing from Eastern Europe in the ASO space is really impressive. I don't know exactly why that originated, but you have hubs like that grow as a kind of leader in terms of talent, investment, companies, all levels at the same time.
But probably only in software development because of how system is built. education
I
system.
mean, you know better than me, but if I'll take a bet and say that actually this is a very long-term consequences of the mathematical education mindset of
Exactly.
the Russia before it was Russia, and like of course there is incredible talent, but the fact that for decades they've like put some focus in education towards mathematics and then programming really help getting where we are today. Not everybody has that, but in the case of Russia, it's kind of really impressive.
Yeah, but it has an opposite side that we don't have, a marketing side of selling these products. So I mean,
Yeah.
Russian developers are great in building something, but are super bad in selling something.
You can't have it all, it's often like this. So maybe SAS would have their salespeople in New York and have development in Moscow or Budapest, and then they have the designers in Berlin or Lisboa, and that's fine. This is how the world is designed today. Make the most of it.
Yeah. And then again, like a little bit side question. So any particular interesting outtakes of experiments that you had during recent weeks? So for example, we saw this a couple of times now, or even more, that people are trying to do like Android first testing. So they moving away from iOS as the main platform for experiments, actually do it there and then go back to iOS. Or we also see this rise of like in-house demand side platforms, like the social points one. So what are the recent like interesting things that you saw?
I mean, there's a lot of those small trends popping up here and there. Like, I mean, when you talk about testing first on Android, I guess it depends a lot what we're talking about. I think for testing, let's say you're testing subscription paywalls. I don't think testing on Android first is the way to go. Like, it might be a little bit more agile, but the conclusion you're making, I mean, in terms of how people subscribe, Android's behavior is just too different from iOS to be conclusive. But typically in the acquisition space, because iOS changed the rules of the games a few months ago, it's clear that on creative testing, a lot of focus has moved to Android. The difference in user behavior on ad creative is not that huge. The price are different and so on, but which creative works well and not is not so different. And it's so much more agile to work on Android. It's actually cheaper, but it's also fast. Like, the data is just so much better. So that typically now is almost standard that you would deploy a lot of creative on Android and only pick the few, like make a first filter and then only take the effort to pay for the iOS audience on this creative for those who win, because the data is so much unreliable. So there's this trend on that creative. In-housing DSP has been, I think, a growing trend for a longer term than that. I'd say early 2020, maybe. Like companies like Beeswax were making a lot of waves in 2019 and 20, and now it's becoming more and more common and gets to smaller players. So there are lots of trends like this. In the last 3 to 6 months, I'd say it's hard to signal one in particular for two reasons. One is I took very long holidays for once and I disconnected a bit, which is unusual for me. So I missed a few things probably in summer and I'm trying to catch up now. But also because the changes pushed by Apple on the acquisition side have such consequences on everybody, not only in the acquisition side, but legal, product, monetization, even from a financial perspective and so on, that a lot of energy and focus has been shifted there. What are we going to do there? How do we adapt the best? And I think here, like, that's been a primary question that has kept us busy. And among this, if one trend I see, like, it's not new, but getting even bigger, in that enables me to look back to the subscription topics, is it's more and more common for subscription apps to have some presence on the web, at least shift part of their early funnel, even sometimes onboard, sign up and charge people on the web before moving them to the app, which some apps have been doing very early on. Babbel was a pioneer on that, and then Blinkist has always done a lot of it. Calm has always done a lot of it, but now I'm starting to see this is almost standard even for smaller apps. Like they just have a web onboarding, and this is just the way to go. Which again opens up possibilities, but raise complexity. You maintain one more platform. It's not as easy as it looks. The acquisition on the web is very different from app acquisition, and often it's not the same people who are good at both things. So complexity is higher, potential is higher too, and this was already existing, but I think Apple changes has really shifted a lot of focus on, hey, what can we do there? And this is definitely an interesting one for me. I've been repeating for years that I don't understand why there are so many barriers between the web environment and app environment. And this one is a change that push people to actually try to bridge the two environment. Not bridge, but at least offer both things. And that's an exciting one, in my opinion.
Don't you think that if you use a web onboarding and web payments can be super beneficial for user acquisition because you can track different channels? I mean, you can use UTM things and track performance.
That's an interesting question. I have a bit of a strong opinion here, which historically, forget about Apple tracking change. Like I had a bunch of people who tell me, I want to go to the web because I don't want to pay the 30% and I'm going to pay 30% to Stripe. It's like, but you're missing a lot of things here. Is that there's so many aspects to this question of being app and web. Tracking is one, monetization is one, but there's a lot of the experience is not exactly the same. You're not going to be able to retain people the same. Very weirdly, I've seen massive drop off. Well, whatever you do, when you start to switch user from an environment to another, so let's say from the browser to the app store in your app, there's always a massive drop off, which, okay, if you acquire people on the web, just have a landing page and drive to the app store. Yeah, I can understand why there's a big drop off. But then I was surprised to onboard user for 30 screens and sign them up and make them a lot of promise and even charge them up, and they would pay my subscription and they say, oh, actually the rest of features you have to go there, and people would not download the app. And I'm like, you've paid for it. Why wouldn't they follow up with the app? And it's such this environment, they're hard to bridge for us on the marketing side, on the development side, but actually for user as well. It's kind of, they live in some kind of isolation. And offering both is not as easy as it looks. It's got a lot of benefits. You don't have the App Store black box. The fee is one. It's pretty obvious. Tracking is now one that is a bit of a new one, but is becoming important. There's also a lot of tricky bits on this. So I'm telling everybody to do it, but not to believe it's going to be a walk in the park either. And anyway, the tracking limitations and let's say measurement limitations, they already started applying partly on the web, and it's going to be more and more as well. Like maybe first was GDPR, and then Apple expands their Safari limitation. And then you fast forward and soon it's going to be Google that obfuscate everything that happens in Chrome. And I hope Flock is not going to be deployed the way it's designed today, because it's basically designed for Google to own the whole web space. But at some point we will have more limitation on the web as well. So you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's exactly what we discussed yesterday with Nikita. Mm-hmm. And what we realized that probably, you can use a first-party domain and save all the analytics. I mean, maybe the idea of developing your own analytics and, collecting these UTM things and storing them and sending back to ad networks is a good idea. And maybe we will see a race in these kind of products. What do you think?
Yeah, for a long time, developing your own attribution system analytics was kind of, for me, a big no-no. You're like, why would you do that? It's massive work. You're going to do it terribly. Your PMs and marketers are going to have horrible, non-reliable data, and you're going to keep engineers busy for something that is not your business. So for years, I thought this was kind of a stupid idea. But then suddenly, the way you can handle first-party data and third-party data becomes so different, which it was not like this, that this question is back on the table. Like, not everybody is able to do it. And I think a lot of people who are going to do it, they're going to screw up and not doing it right. But at least the question is pretty much there. And there is proper reasons to go back to first-party analytics and measurement, because first-party and third-party data is not the same anymore, which it has been maybe it should never have been like this, but it's the way it was designed. And yeah, it was a joy because it made things easy for a long time. We now live in a world where we can't do that anymore. It's just adjusting. Things keeps changing, and if you're not ready for change, you don't want to be in this environment anyway. Some are easier to handle than others. That one is pretty big, but there will be more coming. So just be prepared for it, because that's not going to be the last one.
Yeah, and I mean, we just made an experiment with first-party analytics and Google Analytics, and the difference can be on our audience, like developers, marketers, and etc., tech guys. The difference can be 2-3 times.
Yeah,
and it's really it's absolutely crucial.
It's something you really, really want. Like, discrepancies have always been a bit of a problem, but now they're becoming more of a nightmare than they used to be. And you have SCAD network there and Google Analytics discrepancies there. And what's hard is when you have the several systems living in parallel, nobody knows what to trust anymore. I think inside companies, it's always good to have like a second source to check from and to compare. But it has to be very clear what is the source of truth for the company. Whether it's the exact number doesn't really matter. What matters is that everybody is aligned on we're using numbers coming from this source for this and that, and we all do the same. Otherwise, you start having a PM using one and a marketer using another one and the CFO using another one, and sooner or later, you're going to hit the wall if you behave like that internally. So aligning on the source of truth, I think, is really critical. When you use different systems, there's always going to be discrepancy. 5% discrepancy I'm taking. When it's 2x, it's not manageable, clearly.
All right. As we are wrapping up, Thomas, so what do you think the best advice would be to developers prior to iOS 15 release? Probably next week, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty big question. My big advice to developers would be don't panic and keep your roadmap, because there are changes that happen and you have to follow what you decide. If you let yourself go with every trend, your roadmap will never move forward. So first thing is, don't panic. There's always change. You will adjust, even if it takes a month or 3 months or whatever. You don't have to be ready first day. It's great if you can. If you can't, doesn't really matter. One thing for iOS 15 that I'm very excited about is maybe not for developers, but like marketers within app developers, around the possibility in App Store analytics, and especially around testing in the App Store and custom pages, which are two changes that I've been a big advocate for almost the last 10 years. And I never believed that I would see the day where Apple actually provides this. For me, it's super exciting. But you see how this is a plus. This is something that's going to help marginally, but this is not the core of your business. So I go back to my first advice, which is stick to your vision, stick to your roadmap, and you'll adjust on the way to everything, whether it's tracking or App Store or payment or whatever. You'll get there, but don't lose the sight, don't lose the plot, the big one, which is what you wanted to achieve in the first place, the solution you're trying to bring to users, and are users happy and coming back? Because as long as users are happy and coming back, even if you didn't adjust to iOS 15 and your measurement is terrible and your payment system is not adapted, you'll find a way through it sooner or later. So that's my advice. Don't be sidetracked by all the fancy headlines.
Right. Okay. So where can people find you, in any last thought that you want to leave to our audience?
It was really cool to be there. I feel like we could talk for hours, because there's so many subtopics here that are interesting. So I'll be glad to keep in touch with you three guys, but also people in the audience who want to interact on that. They can find me on Twitter, like you said before, on Thomas BCN. Pretty much any network, if you put Thomas BCN, you'll find me somewhere, except Instagram, I reckon. I'm not there. But otherwise, I'm in a few Slacks, like the ASO Slack or Mobile Dev Memo or the Mobile Growth Stack, which are pretty cool. And then I can't list them all. I have a newsletter called madv.io, pretty much about ad tech and subscriptions, which you can check out. But I'm a fairly easy person to find. So whether you contact me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Slack, Discord, you name it, happy to chat further.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for your advices. I think that was very helpful.
Thanks for inviting.
Thank you so much.
Guys.
Thank you, Thomas.
All right. Thank you.